Hello and welcome to Magetalk. I'm Kalen.
I'm Willem, and we're here today with our friends Bartek and Filip from VueStorefront. Hey guys.
Hello. Hello.
They used to be orange, now they're green. It's a long and winding story.
It's kind of both.
It's a what? Kind of both.
It's an interesting statement because VueStorefront is very much partially. Well, I mean, you're agnostic, backend agnostic, but your roots came from Magento. But I guess Filip, you never fully you were never a full Magento guy, so to say. You were always agnostic, kind of, right?
I mean, I was doing Magento, I was doing a little bit of Magento 1, I was doing a little bit of Magento 2 to just, at least know how painful it is. But yeah, I was more like a front-end guy, so I was more focusing on the front-end frameworks. I started with AngularJS, then Vue.js, a little bit of React. It was never very deep into any e-commerce platform. I mostly work with APIs of like commerce tools, BigCommerce and other ones. But when it comes to the digging into the code and smashing some PHP, it was only Magento. Wow, only Magento WooCommerce.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Like you never got your hands that dirty on Magento code itself. You always had the luck to just work on the headless part and not touch any of the backend code. Which is, I guess, is different for Bartek, isn't it? You've done a lot more Magento stuff.
Yeah, I started the Magento 1 and was there for quite some time. Basically, till I left Snowdog, I was always kind of related to doing somewhere there because our biggest customer was on the Magento 1. So it was obvious choice, but Magento stuff too also hit me, and that's the reason I wrote some stuff that was then open sourced. And some of you may know me just because of that.
Yeah, what was the open source stuff that you worked on?
So the first open source team, I guess, was from Snowdog, was the blank version in the SAS. And along with that, the frontals. Then we also released yet another team, the Alpaca team. So we did a few things for the community.
Yeah, I think a lot of people, a lot of agencies still work with Alpaca today, and that was your birth child, your brainchild. So to say, do you know what happens to that now that you left Snowdog? Are your former colleagues taking that over?
It's maintained, but most likely there is not going to be a new big release that is changing a lot. They are just keeping the stores that they build right now, maybe even building another one on that. But there will be no revolution, mostly because they also start using Hoover, as far as I know. So
that's true. I happen to know that's true. But yeah, I know that they're just starting with the first implementation.
So the whole line of questioning from Willem was bullshit from the beginning. It was a leading question from the beginning. So Bartek, anybody going to maintain that? Meanwhile, in the back of his head, he knows. He already knows.
Say it.
No.
Say it.
You think I'm some kind of evil? No. I mean, there's a lot of agencies still working with it, and I mean, you've worked on that for such a long time that I think it's stable. Anyone can use it. It's free. That's a big plus, which I can't say for Hoover, but I think for us it enables us to build a whole ecosystem around it, and we invest in we have support where people doing the implementations, they can ask us questions, and we try to help them as best as we can. And I would assume that with Alpaca, you didn't go that far because people weren't directly paying you for that. So
yeah, but also the community around Alpaca is not that big. It was mostly our internal thing that few people outside of this topic happened to use. So if we don't answer something and we don't fix it, no one is going to actually do it. So even besides licensing stuff and other thing, it was just like a very niche thing, and just because
I'm sure though, if you would have chosen to commercialize Alpaca at some point, and you would have been paid to build a community, you would have succeeded doing that. But that's a different focus. This is an interesting topic, because that leads us into Filip. You built VueStorefront from an agency and then detached that from the agency. So VueStorefront became completely separate from your agency. How did that?
I have to jump in real quick. I have to ask Filip, as by far the most famous person currently on the podcast, how has the Forbes cover changed your life? Are you fighting off the girls left and right? What's that? Bartek said that he thought you were going to get a cover of the magazine and put it on the back of your wall so that everybody could see it in all your meetings. I don't see that, but
yeah. So it turns out it's not so easy to print something that is that big, because my goal was basically to remove this couch, so I have the all white canvas, and then put the whole cover in there. So every time someone is calling me, I'm just, sitting here, so the face is visible.
Yeah.
Just giving them 5-10 seconds to really look at this, look at the form.
Appreciate it.
And then going to the middle and starting the conversation. So that was my plan. I'm still waiting for that. By now, I know it will happen.
Yeah, it's a work in progress.
That's so funny, because John Yu had this very big bus stop size poster from Meet Magento UK. He was a speaker there, and he took that home, and I think his wife put it on the front door of their house at some point. It was a couple of years ago. It was super funny. You kept seeing pictures pop up from John where his mega poster was. It was funny. Yeah, kind of a meme thingy.
But how was it? Obviously, it must have been exciting to get the Forbes thing. How's all that? Have you been how's everything going? How's everything going in general, Filip? Just overall.
I wasn't invited to Magetalk before, so I consider that.
This is one of the biggest podcasts on the internet.
Oh yeah, this is called Magetalk. You have too many things.
I know. Too many things.
They are all called very similarly.
Very similar. I know. It's a bit of a problem.
Did you heard about Commerce Hero?
Yeah, I heard, and that actually had a different name. But I also heard that right now on Magetalk, you basically have almost the same thing, except it's like a secondary feature.
Yeah,
and it's for free.
Yeah. Pretty much. But Filip, what the hell, man? How's everything going with VueStorefront? Let
me answer all of your questions, because you keep asking them. So regarding Forbes 13 under 13, of course it changed my life. The girls are texting every day. The truth is that there was one that texted on the Instagram, and it was my girlfriend. So it's not such a huge success. I was invited to a party of first 30 under 30. It was on Wednesday, 2 weeks ago. So every party on Wednesday, it finished, I think, around 10. So I was driving 4 hours to Warsaw to be 3 hours on a party. Then I was driving 4 hours back. So was it worth it? I don't know. We will see in the future.
Was the party in Warsaw? so it was in Poland, the party.
Yes. The party was in Warsaw. It was in Poland, like in the capital of Poland, for those who don't know. In general, I have to travel to Warsaw a lot recently, either for some flights, because there are no direct flights from Wrocław, and it's just faster to go there, because the flights right now, even from the short routes, they're extremely expensive. But, I'm going by train, and this is extremely good way of transportation when you have to work. Honestly, I'm just entering the train, opening my laptop, closing my laptop, and I'm there. So I don't really feel like it's traveling. What else?
Oh, that's cool.
The company is going good. We did some good hires, like Bartek, for example. Life is going good. The cats are healthy. I mean, both are healthy. I have 2 cats. So one cat is like the primary one, the one we all love. The second one is the one that was for a year in my parents' house, in my girlfriend's parents' house, because we forgot to...
That's the fallback. You have a primary cat fallback. Failover.
I mean, it's a second cat, like very low maintenance. We try to do some things with him just in case the first cat will get lost or dies, but in general, it's not a primary cat. Let's be honest.
You're going to check the shoes next morning to see if there is nothing in there. I believe, just listen to you right now and thinking, what evil thing can do to you.
Oh, I hope he doesn't understand me, really. Like, sometimes I feel they do, because whenever I'm, on a couch talking some stupid stuff about my cats, they're looking at me. And they have this look that they know. But I never know if they know, but I have a feeling they know.
They know anyways.
Plotting.
And how is your
How does that...
My cat is doing fine. It's right now 14 years old. No diseases or any other signs of being old. And running are crazy. Looking always as good as they want. So
I'm watching on Instagram, actually. So you are taking your cat for a walk without a leash, right?
Yeah, indeed. That's true. My cat is walking like a dog.
I started doing the same.
You take your cat for a walk?
Yeah, but not kilometers away, but I live in a very super close to some trees and other stuff. So basically outside of the fence I have area where I can walk with them. So it's perfectly fine. Of course, it's still a cat. It's not like a...
Do people look at you like you're a psychopath when you walk by with you?
Yeah, but it's isn't that the normal look that people look at you? So,
but do you walk with or without a leash with the cat?
Without
a leash. Oh, damn!
But in the beginning you had a leash, didn't you? When it was
tried, but it's super hard. So I just learned how to do this without, and it kind of works.
And
does she fetch sticks? Can you throw sticks for her? Does she fetch them?
Unfortunately not. But there are other perks of having a cat that just walk by themselves. Just run on some stuff, jump over it, and other things.
Yeah. So Filip, you said that you started walking your cat too?
Yeah, that was a mistake. I mean, so we started walking our cat when I think the cat was 5-6 months old. So it was pretty early, and right now she's demanding this. So every day we have to walk her. Otherwise, our life is hell, really. She's meowing all the time, jumping on different parts of basically everywhere, jumping, screaming, coming to me, looking at my eyes, telling, I want to be walked. Basically, the cat is all over the place. You always hear it. You always hear it jumping somewhere, breaking something. It's terrible. So that was a mistake from this perspective, because right now I basically have a cat and the duties of a dog owner. But at the same time, it's pretty nice thing to do. I mean, we started with a leash. Right now, we trust cat enough to do it without, and we are not walking by forest. I mean, we live in a city, and there is this huge circle of buildings, and in the middle you have something like, I don't know how it's called, like courtyard or something like this, where we basically have trash bins and some things so kids can play. And this is where we walk the cat. Like mostly my girlfriend, and everyone there already knows her. Of course, every time she meets someone, it's like, oh, you have a cat? Yes, I have a cat. And right now everyone knows the cat, so when the cat runs away, the people from the windows upstairs, they're even calling my girlfriend saying, she's here, really. Like, the cat is
cool.
Right now.
That's awesome.
So the question is, who them know better? You because it was in Forbes, or your cat because just is walking outside?
Well, definitely the cat.
So
how does that process work when you get selected for Forbes? How do they find you?
Okay,
Willem is trying to figure out how to reverse. Willem was trying to figure out how to reverse engineer.
You need to be
I'm
under
36.
the
I'm 36. I have no angle here. Just curiosity.
Yeah, this is the first thing I wanted to say. Like, you're too old. But if they will ever have 100 under 100, then you can apply. And honestly, it's not hard. I think probably in every country it's a little bit different, or the European one or the world one is a little bit different. But in our case, last year they invited me, and I didn't get there. Mm-hmm. This year, I sent it on myself, and I got there. So the first rule is don't. If they invite you, just pass. There will be next year, and then apply. Just send what you did, and that was it. I just sent a document, and they replied, and that was the whole process.
So this is a local. So this is was this Europe or Poland?
It is Poland. It is for Poland. So this is what I'm saying. Like, it could be a little bit different for different countries. And even when I was talking with the guy that is in charge of this, he said that it looks a little bit different elsewhere. For example, in Poland, until this year, you were actually able to be there year after year. And there was one person that was there for 6 years in a row. So it's a little bit like Magento, but less interesting.
Alumni.
That's so good.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Cool. So can we go back to my initial question now, Kalen?
Yes, sir. We can do it. Let's go back to it. I don't remember what it was, but we can go back to it.
It was the journey from Divante. So that's that's the agency that Filip came from. Are you completely out of Divante now, Filip? Yeah. Okay. So you're the.
I mean, like, one of the goals that we had when we were creating a separate entity was to don't have Divante on the cap table, to not be related to Divante more than to any other partner agency, because we knew that it is essential for a healthy partner ecosystem. Like, no one would really like to go full into VueStorefront if they will know that officially or unofficially they are supporting the competitor, right? So this is why it also took a lot of time, because I think together with Bart, our third co-founder, that with Patrick we met in January, and we told ourselves, okay, so we'll have a term sheet on the table and a separate entity in March. It happened in November. And during that time, we're very close to quit. I mean, it's not easy. It's not easy to spin off the company from other company that already have a lot of shareholders. They all have different interests, and honestly, like, something like VueStorefront is the last thing they would care about. They have a lot of other stuff, and still you have to reach out to like a C-level people, etc., persuade them to give you like a specific amount of shares, why it's good for the company, why they should actually give it away, etc., etc. It's a long process, and especially when the company that is a shareholder is not very fluent, let's call it like this, in the startup world, or knowledgeable, it's like, breaking the stone, really. Because you have to explain a lot of things, you have to do a lot of persuasion, and you have to do for all of them. But it happened because Bart and Patrick, they really put a lot of sweat into this. And finally, in November, we spun off, we signed the papers. So the same day, we actually were accepted to Y Combinator. So it was a pretty good day, though I don't remember the exact date. I think it was 10th of November, like one of the last days of November. So yeah.
How was Y Combinator? Sorry, Willem. This is one of the downsides of doing a multi-person podcast is it's virtually impossible to get your questioning straight. It's a bit of a nightmare, but so apologies in advance. But Phil, how was Y Combinator for you?
Well, the truth is, we were, I think, in the first remote batch during COVID, so we didn't have this amazing experience of going to Silicon Valley, getting drunk with all of them, you know, like having a drink with Michael Siebel. We didn't have that. It was all online. I think they did everything they could to actually have more or less the same experience. So there was a lot of networking, like they split us into groups to make sure that, you know, we are still talking with each other and we know each other. The groups were mixing from time to time. So I think they did what they could, but it was not like a full Y Combinator experience. Also, what I think is that Y Combinator is the best for the like very, very, very early stage startups. At that time, we had some kind of a business model. We already had customers. We already had pretty good traction. And when we were talking with most of the startups in our batch, they didn't have that. They were either having the first customers or thinking about how to monetize, etc. And the content, because they had like 3 months of lectures, like all the time, really, like every day you had to spend some time for this. If you didn't, you had recordings, but they were teaching you everything about running a startup, running marketing, doing UX. I would call it like a very good startup bootcamp, but at the same time, a lot of things that they taught there, we were not able to relate because we were kind of past that period already. But still, I think it's great.
So they invest in your company and then they give you coaching and they demand some stuff from you to work on certain aspects of your business plan, and they help you with the marketing and stuff, you say? So are they still involved now, or is that a temporary thing that you already have passed you?
They are still involved. I mean, they are not. Let me drink something. So they are not actively involved or proactively involved, but whenever we need something, we know that we can count on the Y Combinator network, and you know, we're just coming to them, asking questions. Sometimes they're making us an intro, sometimes they're just answering directly. So it's useful. It's really useful, and I think, you know, it's probably gonna be useful on all the stages, though it's mostly useful on this very early stage when you don't know anyone, you don't have your own network of advisors, etc. This is where Y Combinator is really priceless, and this is where you can like really, really save a lot of time on doing this sort of stuff. If I would be a first-time founder, I would definitely, I mean, I was a first-time founder and I still are, but as a first-time founder, I found it super valuable because you're alone in the dark when you're running your first company. You have no idea what to do, you have no idea what is good, what is bad, what behavior is expected, what behavior is not expected, how, you know, what is the playbook for different departments. So this is what you're kind of learning during Y Combinator, and I found it super interesting, super useful. I did not remember everything, but even now, like these days, I'm sometimes coming back to some of the things they said, and right now I can relate to them. So it's not only about the first stage. It's also about managing people. It's also about making tough choices, etc.
Did you meet some cool people, like as far as other in the network, like in the founder network? Did you connect with other peers and stuff like that?
So this is something that Patrick is doing more often. Like we didn't have a chance to directly, you know, connect with the coolest folks in the Y Combinator world, but you know, we had meetings with Airbnb founders, we had meetings with Michael Siebel, so we kind of scratched that surface. But again, it was a remote track, and that's full into running a company, because it was not, you know, it wasn't like we took 3 months off from running a company, and right now we're in the university mode. We're still starting everything, and it was just after our fundraising. So networking, I would say, was the last thing we were thinking about at that time.
Right, survival. That makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. So it very much wasn't the classic Y Combinator experience on basically every level.
Yeah,
that's cool, man. That's so impressive. Yeah, that's super cool, man. That you guys got into that.
How long ago is it that they got involved?
How long the decision-making process was for them?
No, when you said it happened in November with the Y Combinator. What year was that? Is it 2 years ago?
2021, if I remember. Yes. And we were in winter 2021 batch.
And and you grew quite a bit over the past since then, I think, right? How many people are you now?
So when we are joining Y Combinator, there was basically a founding team, so 3 founders plus 1 person doing marketing and all the marketing related things, 1 person 2 people for software development. So there were 6 of us. Right now there is a little bit more than 100 after a little bit less than 2 years. So it's pretty big. It's pretty big. Of course, it's extremely challenging. Like, I also don't think that, you should think about the greatness of the company from the perspective of how many people are there, because we're a startup. We got 3 tons of money, and we can literally be even 500 right now. But that's just not what counts. Like, ultimately, the revenue, the ability to close another round, this is what counts. So,
yeah. It can be easy to focus on the head count as one of the main signals, but that can be more or less meaningful. I mean, the moment you hired Bartek, automatically that became less meaningful. Just right.
Because he's a 10-time programmer, right? And he only counts for 1 officially.
That's right. That's right.
This was a hidden compliment.
Yeah,
except that I'm not coding at all.
But we overhired. Like, we hired Bartek. We had no idea he's 10x, so we kind of lowered his salary and told him, "Can you be just 5x?" So right now, Bartek is not coding. He's sparing the remaining 5x for something else.
Just trolling mainly and wasting time.
Yeah.
You do have a lot of time to spend on Twitter. I must, and Slack. But it's good. It's nice the speed in which us 4. Well, Kalen is the slowest one because he disables notifications. But as soon as Kalen posts something that we want to respond to, it's within 5 minutes that we're all free. We all free jump in.
I think Filip had mentioned that you do a Pomodoro workflow where you'll go into the zone for like an hour at a time, and then you'll check Twitter when you come out. I had done some. I have experimented with different things like that over the years. I think that's a good. Does that work pretty well for you, Filip?
Yes, honestly, I had a lot of issues with productivity when I started to be a CTO, because we could imagine that my calendar very soon became full of meetings, and I really didn't have any focus time. So those short periods when I had this time, I was using Pomodoro, because otherwise there will be 20 things that will come at me, and I will try to focus on everything, and I would focus on nothing because I'll be responding, etc. So at the very early days, it helped me a lot to actually, because how I work with Pomodoro is I don't have like 40 minutes focus, 20 minutes of break or something like that. I have 40 minutes focus, 20 minutes of responding on Slacks, Twitters, all others, and then coming back to the zone for 40 minutes, and it works very well. Right now, I'm a little bit further from the engineering tasks, which also fit a lot of my calendar. So I would say right now I'm working like a regular person that can work for like 4 or 5 hours straight without having to jump into a call. And right now it's even more effective. But what I learned is that you can't really do Pomodoro for a very long time. I mean, I'm doing breaks. I'm doing it for like 2-3 weeks. Then I'm doing a break, trying to, work normally. Whenever I see that I'm actually starting to procrastinate a little bit more because it kind of happens naturally, then I'm, coming back to the Pomodoro, training my mind again and trying to do the same thing with the Pomodoro. And it's never-ending cycle, being work.
Yeah, a never-ending cycle of being what?
Of being worse, because I'm finishing the Pomodoro now. Everything is on the right track. I will be able to focus. I will be super productive. The things get worse. I'm coming back to Pomodoro.
Yeah. It's like those things definitely change over time, and you'll try different things, and you'll have periods of being hyper productive, and then you'll find yourself getting distracted, and then you'll have to try something else, and then it kind of is constantly evolving. But what do you, Filip? What are you spending your time on these days? Are you you mentioned you're less connected to engineering tasks and stuff?
Yeah, so the role of a founder is basically usually, it depends, of course, like what is also your title. But I would say if you're a founder, like one of your jobs is being a founder, and being a founder is like jumping into different parts of, your company and seeing where things don't work, or where people maybe need a little bit of push, or maybe they even need a little bit of guidance, or actually involvement of a founder, which also matters a lot for the people. And this is what I do as a founder, but I'm also working right now on the community team, and my job for the next quarter is basically to unfuck bottom-up approach. Because when you have an open source company, and one of the main reasons why you're doing this as open source is so-called bottom-up approach. So bottom-up approach works in a way where you have top-down approach, for the people from the top of the company. They're making choices, they're making business decisions, and everyone at the bottom has to follow. Right. But you also have bottom-up approach, where someone from the engineering team, someone from the architecture team is actually bringing VueStorefront to the table when they are evaluating like what they want to use. Mm-hmm. And those people also have a high influence on those choices. So my goal right now is to make sure that, first of all, they have all-around positive experience when they're interacting with our open source packages, with our open source repositories, when they are on Discord, and give them a little bit of weapons to actually persuade the people that have this decision-making power in the company to use VueStorefront. Because those people usually, and I think it's very common for technical people, because I also had that issues, they think a lot about like what they can do with this tool, what possibilities it could bring, but they don't think that much about why, like what is the biggest purpose, what is the gain, etc. So my goal is to help those people, to give them some pitch decks that they can use, to write a page on our documentation called Convince Your Boss, which will give them good arguments to actually win this fight, and think a little bit from the business perspective, not from the technological perspective. Because if you think, we can make things faster, and it has this, and this feature, and we'll be doing less technical debt, etc. It's like try to tell to any business-minded person things like that, and they won't understand the thing. And unfortunately, this is exactly how the business and tech conversation happen in most of the companies and in most of the environments. Like they speak two different languages. And right now, I moved from engineering to go-to-market team. I can call it like that. And the truth is, I learned a lot. I really learned a lot. And my mind is even thinking a little bit differently, because I was so focused on the initiatives and not so much on, maybe not the outcomes, but the underlying motivation for that, like going really deep into like why we're doing this. Not because other people have this and this is a good feature. Like, the go-to-market team doesn't think this way. They think a little bit differently. And right now, my perspective is also broader. So I'm kind of trying to leverage this experience, think from the perspective of the developer before, and, use this knowledge to actually arm our contributors and community members with this knowledge and teach them how to talk with the business personas.
That's really cool.
What departments do you have in your company? So I've already heard Some now. Well, how are those 100 people divided? Like, what kind of teams? How did you build up? And what team is Bartek on?
A trolling team.
Bartek is in HR right now. No, just kidding. So we have this engineering and product team right now. They are working together, and we are right now making this differentiation. We didn't have that before. So before we just had engineering team. An engineering team was basically the team that took care of the community stuff, of the product stuff, of the engineering stuff. Right now we're dividing this a little bit. So we have product and engineering team, and the product and engineering are divided. We have go-to-market team, and under go-to-market team you have like customer success, you have community also. Community used to be part of the engineering team, but what we notice is that if this is part of the engineering team, there's no way they're going to collaborate with anyone from go-to-market, because the community team is naturally closer to the developers always, and it's creating some kind of a silo. So we moved this team to the go-to-market, and honestly, in most of the organizations that I read about, it is under some kind of like a marketing team. So we have this go-to-market, and we also have operations, and operations is like everything else, like HR, BI, this sort of stuff. And it works pretty well. Probably it will work for some time, but organizations are changing, and we'll be probably more and more granular. Right now, we are kind of switching from the organization of generalists to the organization of specialists, and it is also reflected in the organization chart.
And how remote is everyone? Do you have a main office, right?
No, I mean, we have the main office. It's like a co-working space, and we have one room with 2 chairs. So, like, if you happen to be in Warsaw, feel invited. But in general, everyone work totally remotely. So we were remote from the first day. We kind of didn't have a choice because it was during COVID, and we just stayed like this. And I think that was good. That was very good, because a lot of companies, when they're starting, they're thinking, okay, right now we need an office, they're renting a flat, etc. We didn't even have, to choose that, because it was COVID. There was no point in having it. So we had to learn how to work remotely from the day one. There was no other choice, and we stayed like this. Right now, it's kind of like a perk. But also we knew that if we want to create a global startup, we need to hire a lot of people globally. And it's very hard to do all of that in the Polish markets, especially when you want to be like international company. You need people from sales, but also from other departments to not be all in one country.
Time zones.
Yeah, that's a little bit challenging, but we try to have teams that are from the same time zone if possible, and teams that are from mixed time zones. Like when we have people from different time zones, kind of try to put them in the same team, if that's possible. But it is challenging, especially that we're not async first. We try to, but it's a long way, and sometimes this asynchronous communication is crucial. And not for everyone it works. Like we have some team leaders that clearly say that we don't want people from other time zones. Or we even have team leaders that clearly say we don't want people from other countries, because having to speak English during our team meetings, it makes communication harder. And in general, we are in favor of such requests.
The async first thing is interesting, because I tend to sometimes assume remote companies are super async, and I was even chatting a little bit with the MageOS team about meeting structure and async versus synchronous meetings and stuff like that. And I think that's like probably a general best practice. But it's non-trivial to actually do it, like, especially with a certain size team and everything like that.
There's a difference, though. If you have regular meetings and you work together, you know all of the context of each other's work, and you have if someone writes you a message, you more or less know what they mean. If you if it's outside of your business context, so with the meetings of MageOS, these are people all from different companies that don't see each other in person often, don't have meetings outside of the one that we plan every week or every 2 weeks. And then writing out messages takes so much longer than just having a 30-minute phone call, because I can tell you stuff in 30 minutes that would take me longer than a day to write out. Because then I would think about, okay, so how does this come across? If I write, I shouldn't write this like this, because he will probably think I'm angry. And if I talk to you and I tell it to you with a smile and a certain tone in my voice, you don't need to think about how I mean something. You know I'm being sarcastic.
Yeah, I mean, I agree, and I think reasons are the same reasons for every group ever that has preferred meetings and has been used to meetings and had said asynchronous won't work because of those reasons. And I think that, and without getting in too much into the MageOS stuff that we were talking about in Slack privately, this goes to the Magento Association stuff as well. I see it as the same thing where they're like, hey, great idea. Let's talk about that in our next meeting in 4 weeks. And it's like, guys, what exactly do you guys need for this website thing? Write it down somewhere and let's, get it. So I see that as another instance of the same mindset. And I know there's reasons for it, and meetings can be good, obviously. I mean, this is we're doing a meeting right now. But I don't know. I
think when you're seeking alignment, then a phone call is much quicker. Like, you can decide on next steps, and then in between meetings you work the stuff out. But just if you don't have that alignment yet, it takes so much time to write out messages and find the alignment that way. So it doesn't, ideally, also with the association, people would be working a lot in between meetings. So it's not just the meetings, but the meetings are crucial just to get a common understanding within the group, and that takes so much more time and energy if you do it asynchronously.
It just occurred to me that we have not brought up yet the topic for the episode, which is the MACH Alliance, which I think we're talking about associations and stuff like that. But Filip, you were recently added to the MACH Alliance. How's that going? And maybe I don't understand it too well, but is that been how's all that going for you?
Oh, this is another question I was waiting for, but I'm glad that you didn't ask that yet. So, I mean, I was part of MACH Alliance. I was part of MACH Alliance for a very long time because VueStorefront was one of 10 or 11 companies that was actually like a founding members of MACH Alliance. We're not the ones founding it, but we were there at the moment of announcing it. And right now, I was just invited to the Tech Council, and in the Tech Council, we have around 50-60 people, so that's a lot, really, that's a lot. Even though right now they are making some changes. So right now they're making kind of like a tiers in the council, so there are people who want to be much more involved, spend like 2-3 hours a week, and they are kind of in the core team. And you have other people that just want to be stay updated, that want to be able to express their opinion on some strategic things, but they don't have time to commit 2-3 hours a week to actually work on MACH Alliance. Mm-hmm. I plan to be the core team member because what I see in general, and it's not only about MACH, it's not only about headless, but in general in our space, like web development space, it is very much hype driven. So there is a lot of those buzzwords that we are using to actually call the next big thing, which are either like a subset of the previous big thing or exactly the same thing, but a little bit renamed.
Yeah. Don't mention composable commerce in front of Willem. He'll start twitching.
That's the C in MACH, right? I was just thinking, MACH stands for monolithic application.
Yeah,
Disable commerce.
Exactly. Monolithic applications, carefully. I don't know.
Handpicked.
Handpicked,
So
yeah.
is it micro architecture? No, micro
Microservices, API based, composable,
Right.
Composable.
and headless.
Not composable. It's actually cloud native.
Oh, right.
So composable goes under headless because headless is kind of like a broader term, and composable
Right.
is basically okay. So we have a headless store, but you also have shit tons of different services that you have to somehow glue together.
Right.
So this is when you think composable. You think composable when at the back of your head you thought, oh shit, there's so much of those services, I can't plug them into the front end. So this is where you have a composable stack, like the easiest way to determine.
I have a question that
Are you already
I have a
composable?
question. Yeah. I have a question that might be interesting for you, for Willem and Filip to chime in on. And especially Filip from the perspective of things being buzzwordy. So composable commerce, right? Like I think Willem and I talked about this on a podcast. He said, listen, Magento's been composable forever. When you think about from the perspective of you're going to plug in a shipper HQ for your shipping, you're going to plug in different things, different SaaS options. Maybe you're going to plug in a checkout, whatever. Whereas from the kind of more pure composable commerce perspective, I'd imagine it's a little different, right? But I kind of can see his argument. I guess the way I would phrase the question is, Filip, what's an example of composability that Willem's definition of plugging SaaS into Magento doesn't fit? Does that question make sense? I'm trying to kind of get at what are we talking about? What exactly is composable, is not composable?
Okay, so this may sound like I'm very good at selling what my company is doing, but yes, monolith can also be composable, and this is what Willem was talking for a lot of times, really. So I think we have some problems in our industry. So when we have a word like composable or headless, and they are kind of a new waves that are highlighting some specific way of building software, a lot of people try to attribute a monopoly to this particular way of building software, to this new term. And this is the problem, because a lot of things can be composable. Lego can be composable, like monolith can be composable. A headless application can also be composable, and in general, when we mean composable, we mean extreme composable, like the extrema, where you have a lot of services, you need a specific orchestration layer, but you also want to decouple. But it doesn't mean that you can compose in monolith, that you can compose in any other architecture. You can, really. It's not a problem at all. The same way, like when you have a Magento store, you can really talk to the APIs of different platforms. You don't have to manually add any kind of like PHP rendering or this sort of stuff, and any PHP client for that, right? It's only about like the extreme use case and like this perfect use case. And it's not about having monopoly on this particular feature. It's more about being the best at this particular thing. So composable is great when you have, a lot of services, when you need a lot of services, because your business is so big that small changes in the workflow or small changes on the front end, they will make a huge difference when it comes to the revenue. This is where you need that. But at the same time, you could also have your Magento store. You can plug in 5 or 6 or 7 different APIs, and you're still composing. But this is just not the main reason why you chose Magento or why you chose Composable. You're choosing Composable to have this flexibility, to know that your biggest pain point would be gluing all of those things. This is where, when you're choosing them, when your biggest pain point would be somewhere else, you would probably choose a monolith.
Mm-hmm.
I think the difference is if you as a company decide to go the MACH way, or if you approach your architecture from composable standpoint, you will end up with something different than a monolith that has a lot of services plugged into it. Because if you're going the MACH way, then that's woven through your whole business, and it's not just your e-commerce layer, but it's throughout the whole business, and you try to have all of your systems work independently, you need a glue to put that together, and Magento can be that glue to put things together. But it could still be that all of your services are composable. It's just the only difference is that if you would use Magento for that in a monolithic way, that your front end might not be headless. So it could or could not be headless. So it's more like the general approach from as a business perspective. You could be composable minded and work that all the way through your business, or not. But the monolith still fits into that ideology. But perhaps headless is more sensible if your company is also separating your development, for example. So if you have a development team that likes to work with JavaScript and are super effective in those technologies, you can separate them out from the guys that are doing the backend work. You could outsource the backend work and do the front-end work in-house or whatever. But yeah, for every argument you give, I'm always almost tempted to make the counter argument, like you could probably still also do that with Magento. You could have a front-end team working on Magento separate from the back-end team. So this discussion can continue on endlessly. Yeah, it's an interesting movement in the market, the MACH thing. But I think
I would add one thing that I believe is true in most cases. The composable with the headless in the MACH way is usually that anywhere in your architecture you don't have a single point of failure, like sometimes some service that is stateless and is gluing. But middlewares are usually, middlewares are usually not stateless, not stateful. They're just passing some network. So the chances that something goes south in that area are relatively low because it's just like a bit more smarter proxies.
Yeah, like the non-composable way, I would call it like a very platform-centric, and the e-commerce platform is your center of the universe. If this goes down, like nothing will work. While in composable, theoretically, you can put, a house monkeys algorithm and just kill some of the services and just some of the features will not work.
So if your shipping provider goes down, headless still works? If your pricing system,
Of course, it depends how well designed it is, but if that's just a fallback or something.
Actually, I have a question on that, because the shipping thing is something I was curious about too, as well as from a question of composability. Are people actually swapping out or putting in fallback providers for things like shipping? Like, do you... because that's where I think to myself, well, whether you're monolith or composable, if you're relying on one shipping thing and shipping goes down, you're kind of screwed. But do you guys see it where people will have a fallback shipping provider if one shipping provider API goes down, or is that still sort of
because it's usually related to writing some agreements and paying stuff. So you are usually tied to some service that is for you. But also it very depends on the region. I believe in Europe it's not that common that shipping provider is actually doing a lot. Mm-hmm. Because like if you are shipping within a single country at a single rate, you don't need to check the addresses and other stuff. Right. The billing is usually like static thing. So even if the provider goes down, it's on your e-commerce site that actually can retry and eventually make this shipping happen.
Right.
So of course depends.
Like the truth is, I never saw that personally, and I also don't see any reason to do that.
Just because the shipping providers are used generally stable enough that it's not enough of a priority.
I mean, for almost, or I think every enterprise level agreement that you're signing, you have some decent level of SLA, and I don't think anyone in the enterprise world will buy anything that doesn't have like at least 3 nines.
Yeah, that makes sense. I get
phishing, etc. Like there's literally no way that it will break so much
that makes sense.
Your store will be unusable.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I've seen FedEx go down.
I would just say, like, the SaaS, and then if FedEx goes down, sometimes obviously the shipping provider can wrap some logic around that and stuff like that. And these SaaS companies are getting more and more mature to the point where they're offering those terms and those uptime guarantees and stuff like that. I guess the thing I struggle to wrap my head around is if we're talking about composability, we're talking about swap it in, swap it out, change it, whatever. If the SaaS that you're composing or plugging in, if it's not easy to change that because of the terms you have, because you're paying for it, because your team is relying on the interface and the functionality of that SaaS, then what do we mean when we say that you can easily swap them in and out if in practice you're not going to switch out Klaviyo very often. You're not going to switch out Sugar. That's the thing I'm trying to wrap my head around. Filip, I'm curious.
I would say that different parts are designed to be changed easier than shipping, payments, and other stuff, because that's kind of the foundation of the business. What you are usually changing is the technical stuff, more related to what, for example, administration is doing. So, for example, you are going to change the CMS platform to something different because have the feature that, for example, marketing team might need. And in that scenario, it's most likely easier to do than putting it outside of the monolith.
Yes, exactly. So you have a little bit or a much less tight coupling. And when you're switching e-commerce, for example, e-commerce, its responsibilities are not as wide as before. So it's not like your front end, whole back end, and basically center of the universe. Usually it's just some kind of a skeleton that is used to plug in some other third-party services, or sometimes it's only about making an order or something like that, right? So that's the beauty. That's the beauty of this composability. But at the same time, every vendor sooner or later they will be trying to lock into their ecosystem. They will try to enforce a vendor lock-in. So there is also a lot of vendors that are actually kind of like gluing all the other things, but they have things like internal fields that they are adding to the data formats for the integration. This is some kind of a tight coupling already right now, but it's still, I would say, of course, it really depends on the product, but it's still much less than we're used to with monoliths.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a funny dynamic with all these SaaS companies because they're becoming more and more mature. They're becoming bigger, right? Economically, they're becoming stronger. They're building out their own partner ecosystems. I mean, you look at the Klaviyo partner ecosystem, right? They've got more and more entrenched interest and vendor lock-in because essentially they're doing a good job at building their business. So that it's funny because you're talking about composability, which essentially means how easy is it to change one vendor for another, where the vendors are becoming more and more entrenched just by the nature of the fact they're doing a good job as a vendor. So it's an interesting kind of like tension.
But Kalen, you could have composability and vendor lock-in at the same time. It's not like the only purpose of composable is not that you're not locked into an ecosystem of a particular vendor. It's more about flexibility to change things, sometimes to the things from the same vendor, sometimes not, to work on them parallelly, etc. Right? So we see that a lot of companies, and one of them is slowly becoming even commerce tools, that they have this headless, let's call it, or API first backend, and then they're also buying a bunch of services that integrate with them well. So they have their own payment gateway, they have their own CMS, etc. They're still API first, but you're plugging in are basically still services from the same vendor. And I think this is all right. This is all right as long as you have this flexibility to actually change different parts of your system.
You're muted, Filip.
Oh yeah, you're muted. Sorry.
Oh no! When that happened?
You're back.
Just
you're
a
back.
second.
Yeah,
just a second.
Okay, because imagine you have so many different vendors. You are in a space that is completely new, so there are no vendors rising. Some of them are bankrupting. Some of them are getting acquired. It's a risky space to be, and some of the pricings they could change. Some of the terms and conditions they could change. Some products could change. You really need this flexibility in the new space. it's much, much safer actually to invest into something like this and know that, oh, if I made this decision wrong, it's not going to cost me rewriting everything. I also like to, to think about this from this perspective, because there are always a lot of benefits with being early adopter, or right now even not an early adopter, but in general in buying into a new technology. But at the same time, one of the risks is that it's so changing that every decision that you make should be more or less reversible.
Mm-hmm. So
It's fun.
Yeah, go ahead, Willem. Go ahead.
Yeah, we talked about this before, Filip and I, that the goal of Composable is the interchangeability of systems, but in practice, with any system, you see that data is so specific to the implementation that swapping it out directly is a really big challenge. And unless you have a normalized data set, so you would say any external CMS has these attributes, and they are post title, category, go on, and you have all of that defined, and all of those content systems need to follow that data set. Only then you can just swap between systems. But now the challenge is migrating your data from one CMS to the other, and then re-implementing the glue, as you call it, with Composable. Like, you need to redo the integration or the data mapping between your third-party CMS and your own implementation. So that's still, I think that's the promise of Composable, but that's still today as big of a challenge as with the monolith. Like, you need to rewrite stuff, you need to re-implement if you want to swap out one system. And it's kind of a dream. I said earlier, like, if you've ever integrated an ERP system with a commerce system, and you try to make that as global that it can be reused, you will find out that it's nearly impossible to make a universal adapter for an ERP, because everyone has different products, different data sets, different integrations. And that's just like, that takes months and months and months to integrate usually, especially at that size where Composable is targeting. So
and most likely it will never happen. It's really hard to define something like unified data model that will be the same for Shopify and SAP, for example. It's like the spectrum is so wide that like the platform exists because they're different. They're not like doing all of the same, and that's where the difference comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And we tried that. We really tried that. We tried that with VueStorefront 1. We are trying to adjust everything into like one common format, the Magento format. It didn't work. With VueStorefront 2, we initially tried to just have some kind of like a more free abstract format. It also didn't work. With a product that Bartek is doing, we also tried, and as far as I know, it also didn't work. But I also don't think like this universality of having plug and play systems is what Composable is about. You don't aim to have this plug and play experience. You aim for a lighter coupling, and also, when you're talking about coupling, you want to be coupled with the things that are actually more universal, like front end, like the orchestration layer. Their features, they probably won't change that much, and they are pretty universal. While all the backend services that have a very nuanced features and a very nuanced behavior, pricing, etc., this is something that you want to have a little bit more decoupled. So it's also about moving this epicenter of your software from the e-commerce platform to the orchestration layer on the front end.
Seems like these middleware layers I keep hearing about are maybe going to wrap these things up. Like, if you have a middleware that can like the vendors are never gonna all agree on universal data models. But I think the middlewares can do that themselves, and then as different middlewares become more popular and widely adopted, they'll have more and more incentive to go in and map data fields intelligently to some kind of a standard. I still don't think I understood the example, Filip, that you were giving where you were saying you can have vendor lock-in and composability at the same time. I know you mentioned Commerce Tools and how they're acquiring services to plug in, but could you explain that to me one more time, like I'm 5? How can you have vendor lock-in and composability?
I think the easiest way would be to say, okay, so here you have orchestration layer, here you have all of our services, and we're integrated with all of those services. If you want to use something else, you can do this, but you have to manually integrate and you have to adjust into our own formats. And this is exactly what SAP Spartacus is doing, for example. I was in the core team of SAP Spartacus for, I think, 6 months. I was laying like foundations for this project together with a lot of other amazing engineers. And one of the things that they are doing is actually, yes, you have headless right now, is fully composable, but at the same time, when you want to integrate anything that is not from SAP, you have to integrate it in a way that fits into this SAP API. So this is the easiest example I can give you.
Okay, so you're still locked into SAP, or you're still locked into Commerce Tools as a base, but then you can use some of their services for specific services, or you can use other vendors.
It's more, yes, exactly. It's just about making our services so easy to use that it's a sin not to do this, and using usage of other services as hard as possible.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, I appreciate you explaining that. Nice. Surprise, Willem.
I would like to go on for another hour because I think there's still a lot of interesting things we could talk about, but I kind of had a hard cutoff 15 minutes ago. And we're beyond.
Fair enough.
My friend is having birthday and we are going for a dinner and it's happening in 45 minutes. So
Nice. Well, thanks so much, guys. This was a blast. I'm sure Bartek has a date or two to get to as well. Couple of his girlfriends, but
I'm
thanks.
just thinking the girlfriends that Filip don't want to have.
Okay.
Well, thanks everybody for tuning in, and we will see you next week. Make sure to check out Filip and Bartek on the socials. We'll plug their stuff in.
Amazing.
Thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening. Bye bye.
Thanks for having
us. This is definitely the brightest moment of my career.